Christina had not only been denied by her mother, but her husband also had distanced himself from her. If he just had left her alone it might be tolerable, but he and his family had spread very malicious rumors about her in the church. Somehow, they came to know that she was confined in a mental hospital. Not surprisingly, Brother Bruno, his brothers, and sisters paid her a visit. Then, they returned to the church and spread their spiritual interpretations of what had happened to Sister Christina. According to them, she had given a foothold to Satan and opened herself to demonic attacks because she left her lawful husband and began to live with a white man in a shameful and an open adulterous relationship. They claimed, for that reason God had delivered her to Satan to destroy her body. They said further that when they visited her in the mental hospital they found her was chained hands and legs to her bed and fed like a wild beast in a cage at the zoo. She looked like a witch and her hair was disheveled like a mad woman. She always tore her clothes and exposed her nakedness and bit anyone that came within range. She screamed constantly and spoke unintelligibly. She often broke the chains and the hospital staff found it difficult to restrain her. The spirit of Jezebel possessed her and her body was infiltrated by many more demons. They concluded their spiritual report by saying that she was having a legion of demons inside her body, 1,000 evil spirits. Their report led many leaders and believers to take a trip to that mental asylum and confirmed the rumors about the demon-possessed bitch, Christina Fernandez. It became like a tourist attraction to the members of that born-again church. Many mothers took their daughters over there to show them the consequences of disobeying the word of God. Some fathers accompanied their sons to the mental hospital and showed them the punishment of committing premarital or extramarital sex. Even, the senior pastor of the church used the demon-possessed woman's case as a practical example for marital unfaithfulness. On one Sunday, he preached from the pulpit a long sermon on marriage and adultery and mentioned her by name and referred to her white boyfriend by ethnicity. Only a very few adventurous believers had pity on Sister Christina and visited her many times and attempted to cast the demons out of her body, but every time their attempts failed. All members of that church collectively believed that the Lord had delivered Christina Fernandez to the devil to destroy her body because of her adultery. By the way, Brother Bruno considered his life had come to an end when he heard the disturbing news from the American consulate. His faith in the Lord was seriously shaken. Mrs. Fernandez lost her mind completely when her son informed her that his wife had cancelled her sponsorship on the same day she ran away from his apartment and began to live with the white man. Wherefore, Mrs. Fernandez started to talk to herself as a mad woman. Mr. Fernandez had major heart attack and died shortly at the Nanavati hospital. Brother Bruno did not only lose his wife and father, but he permanently lost his job and his life dream of immigrating to the promised land, the land that flowing with money and honey, had gone forever. Although Christina was disowned by her mother, hated by her husband and in-laws, and condemned as a fallen and possessed woman by her church, still her lover and spiritual friend determined neither to leave her nor to forsake her. Michael continued to live in Mumbai and every day visited his beloved in the mental hospital. As soon as she became mentally sick, he began to pray and fast for her healing. He spent many hours in her apartment fasting and praying for her. Whenever he visited her in her cell at the mental hospital, he played his guitar and sang her favorite hymns. Every time he tried to communicate with her, she saw him as a ghost and went berserk. In spite of this, it was not in Michael to give up on her. He approached the hospital authorities and requested to be allowed to transfer her to an American mental health facility. He promised to cover the expenses of her transfer. The hospital rejected his application because the patient wasn't related to him. He tried to convince them to allow him to take her on humanitarian grounds, but they refused. He also tried to take her as his common-law partner or conjugal partner, but the hospital rejected his application because they already had on file that Christina was married to someone by the name of Bruno Fernandez. Besides that, common-law partners and conjugal partners are not recognized as legitimate relation between unmarried couple in India. Michael informed the hospital that the relation between Christina and Bruno was broken prior of her mental problem. They asked him to bring an official proof that her husband had divorced her or given him permission to take his wife to America. Michael went to Bruno Fernandez in the church and requested him to either divorce Cristina or give him permission to transfer her to America for better treatment. Brother Bruno rejected the request of Michael and accused him of being the reason behind his wife to forsake him and cancel her sponsorship for him and his parents. Moreover, he said to him in front of everyone in the church, "My wife is possessed by demons because of her adulterous relationship with you." Michael denied the allegation and tried to convince Brother Bruno and the leaders of the church that he knew Cristina from America and she stayed in his parents' house prior to her conversion to Christianity and through him she came to know the Lord. He said further that Cristina and he were only good friends and there was no any carnal relation between the two of them, but no one believed his story. The church leadership rejected his explanation and told him never to come again to their holy sanctuary. Michael did not give up. From the Bandra church he travelled to the Mumbra mosque, and talked to the Mullah Sheikh Uldin Khan in front of his entire congregation. He requested him to allow him to meet his wife, Begum Rayhana Khan. He explained that he wanted to obtain the permission of Cristina's mother for transferring her sick daughter to the United States of America for better treatment. The angry mullah would have killed the infidel Michael at the spot if it wasn't for the many faithful who were present inside the prayer hall. Nevertheless, he controlled his boiling rage and talked to Michael. He told him that his third wife, Begum Rayhanaji Khan, had never had a daughter in all her life and she already had testified in court that she had none. Besides that, his wife was born and brought up as a Muslim, and that girl admitted that she was a Christian by birth. Accordingly, that girl was either confused or paid by some people in order to drag his wife again to court and bring disgrace to his family. Michael tried to clear the misunderstanding, but the mullah threatened that he would hand him over to the police if he ever approached him again. When Michael did not yield to the threats and continued to beg for mercy, the mullah shouted at him, cursed him, and kicked him out of the mosque. Then, Michael visited 2 Protestant churches and sought their help. The first church apologized and didn't give any reason for their inability to help. The second church contacted Cristina's church and obtained nasty report about her, which implicated Michael himself. Therefore, they told him on his face, they won't help rebellious and backslided Christians. Finally, Michael Lewinsky approached the government of Maharashtra, explained to them the problem of his sick Indian girlfriend, and requested to be allowed to take her to the United States of America for medical treatment. He judiciously withheld the fact that Cristina Fernandez was a married woman and her husband an Indian. He just said that she was his girlfriend and she used to live with him in his house in America. He even provided evidence that when he came to Mumbai he stayed with her in her apartment at Bandra and that she was his common-law partner. It so happened that when Michael approached the government of Maharashtra, India has just a couple of days earlier recognized common-law partners. The new law passed by a Bandra court on the grounds of the lawsuit which filed by the superstar film actress, Kareena Kapoor, a Hindu, and her boyfriend, the film star, Saif Ali Khan, a Muslim. Due to their religious differences, which stood on the way of their marriage, the lovers decided to live as common-law partners. Michael added that when they came to India to visit a church in Mumbai his girlfriend had developed a serious mental sickness. The government believed his story and approved his request. When the hospital received an official letter from the government of Maharashtra endorsing its approval of the transfer, it allowed Michael Lewinsky to take Cristina Fernandez to America. Meanwhile, Brother Bruno's hope of immigrating to the Promised Land was resurrected again when someone in the church advised him to take his mad wife to America for better treatment. Before that, he wished she would die a horrible death in her filthy cell as divine retributions for cancelling her sponsorship application, which caused the untimely death of his father, the madness of his mother, the loss of his job, and the death of his life dream. But now he found a golden opportunity to use his mad wife as a passage for him to reach that heavenly land which flows with money and honey. Accordingly, he went to the American consulate and demanded the reissue of his visas so that he could transfer his ill wife to her country, the United States of America, for better treatment. The consulate rejected his demand and informed him that his wife came in person and said that her relationship with her husband was broken. Unless she comes again and retreats her words, the consulate in no uncertain terms would issue no visa for him. The selfish husband's anger and hatred towards his wife was intensified when he knew that his hope of reaching his paradise was dashed forever. Meanwhile, Michael's sincere efforts yielded their fruits and he was allowed to transfer his girlfriend to his native country. Shortly after the so-called demon-possessed daughter-in-law was transferred to the States, the Fernandez clan had unwanted guests. Those visitors were the same Islamic terrorists who chased and pursued Aphrodite Khan and her mother Rani Krishna out of Mumbai, Baroda, New Delhi, and ultimately forced them to flee out of their motherland. The Dawood Ibrahim's Muslim terrorists obtained the address of Fernandez through the Muslim employee of Aphrodite Khan's lawyer. Christina gave a copy of her passport to her lawyer which listed her husband's permanent address. Moreover, the copy of the passport had a photo of the blasphemous beauty queen, Aphrodite Krishna Khan. Therefore, the Muslim employee concluded that Aphrodite Khan changed her name to Christina Fernandez in order to hide her true identity. As soon as the Muslim terrorists came to know that that blasphemous woman was back in Mumbai, the old feud started all over again. This time, the terrorists were 100% sure that the insulter of their holy prophet and holy book had fallen in their hands. One of the terrorists' leaders said, even God wouldn't save her from him. The news of her imminent death reached the ears of their Lucifer, Dawood Ibrahim, in Dubai. The devil Ibrahim warned his terrorists that if this time that accursed Indian slut escaped again he would murder them instead. So, those Muslim terrorists knew and understood that if they failed to kill Aphrodite Krishna Khan then their mission would become a suicidal mission. The Muslim terrorists demanded to know the whereabouts of the blasphemous Indian bitch who dared to spit on their holy Quran and called their blessed prophet Muhammad, my foot. When those anti-social elements showed up, brother Bruno, his mad mother, and his 3 sisters were at home. His brothers were all at work. His 3 sisters were unmarried and still sealed virgins. The Muslim terrorists began to torture and molest them when they denied any knowledge of Aphrodite Krishna Khan. Nonetheless, Bruno told the terrorists that he had no knowledge that his wife had spoken against the founder of Islam and the holy scripture of Muslims. Then, he added quickly that his wife Christina had become mad and hence she was confined into a mental hospital at Marine Drive. He further said that, before she became mentally unsound, he kicked her out of his house because she began to cheat on him with a white guy. Then, the extremely frightened Bruno added that, his wife was possessed by Satan due to her adulterous relation with the white man. The Muslim terrorists didn't accept his tale and insisted on knowing where his wife was hiding. Bruno said to them, the last thing he heard from the mental hospital authority was that, his unfaithful wife ran away to America with her white boyfriend. The Muslim terrorists refused to believe his story. They threatened to rape his sisters in front of him if he didn't tell them where his wife Christina was hiding. When no information was coming, the first sister was raped. She was the oldest. She was 19 years old. She had to suffer the terror and the shame in front of her mother, brother, and 2 sisters. She had to bear the brunt of 3 savage attacks. The second sister was next. She was just 17 years old. When the rape of the 2 sisters did not give the brutal terrorists what they wanted, they decided to up the brother by threatening to kill the remaining sister. With no information forthcoming, the third sister was repeatedly stabbed in the chest. She was 16 years old. The other 2 sisters could not stand the brutal murder of their sister, so they closed their eyes and surrendered their fate to God. They couldn't even cry out since they were by now muffled and gagged. The mother was deaf to the world. She just stared blankly at her children, while those cruel terrorists were torturing them. After the rape of the 2 sisters and the murder of the third, the terrorists had to admit that the Fernandez clan were simple of no more use to them. So, they spared Bruno and his mad mother and left. The deadly terrorists' attack on the Fernandez kids received hundreds of spiritual interpretations by the members of that born-again church. None of those interpretations was worth mentioning. Sadly, the common belief among all the brethren of that church was that none of the two survived sisters would find a boy to marry her after the children of the devil had brutally raped her. When Cristina Fernandez was transferred from her Mumbai hospital to the one Michael had selected in the United States, she had already spent a few weeks in a catatonic state. In the States, her condition was more accurately diagnosed and treated. After spending a couple of months in therapy, Cristina began to show signs of improvement. She didn't fear people anymore. She stopped seeing things. Her recovery was painfully slow, but she was no longer shackled to her bed, but was still confined to private room. The hospital ward allowed her boyfriend to visit her inside her room if she was calm. During his visits, Cristina did not react to his presence, staring vacantly at him without any sign of recognition. After 6 months of care, the mental health care professionals declared Cristina mentally sound. They cautioned that the trauma of her situation had resulted in her subconsciously blocking off large chunks of her memory, and she wasn't likely to regain her memory again. During the period of his Indian girlfriend's illness, Michael Lewinsky stumbled upon her past life and learned great deal about her kidnap, rape, and imprisonment in Asmara, Tehran, and Mumbai. He actively participated in her therapy and played an active role in investigating how her past trauma had contributed to her condition. He never once believed, unlike her husband and Indian church, that she was possessed by demons. Neither did he believe that the act of her mother's denial alone would have resulted in trauma of this degree. He remembered that when they were in his grandparents' house she told him that she won Miss Mumbai, Miss India, and Miss World. Moreover, he recollected that while they were sitting by the lake shore she told him that she had around $95 million. He also knew that Cristina was deeply in love with him and she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. Michael figured that a successful and high-profile girl like Cristina, who had millions of dollars, would not feel so rejected and neglected just because her mother had disowned her in public. Her marital problem could not be the catalyst to her breakdown either because she was managing it as well as could be expected. He suspected that there was something deeper than those family problems. So, he used her former name Aphrodite Khan, which she used before her conversions to Hinduism and Christianity, and began to search in the internet. His search revealed startling discovery, which confirmed his doubts. Michael came across her live interview that she made in public in the Stink News channel when she was accused of being Bollywood prostitute. Through that interview, he came to know about her child marriage with the 70-year-old Saudi man, Sheikh Faiz bin Ahmed. He learned that when she was 7 years old, on the pretension of the Islamic child marriage, the old man imprisoned and raped her for 10 years. Then, she was kidnapped by the Bollywood film director, Mahmood Khan, who imprisoned her in his farmhouse and tortured and raped her through his sadistic tendency for 1 year. Shortly after her release, she was accused of being a high-profile Bollywood prostitute and jailed for 12 months in Mumbai. Then, Michael learned that Cristina got adopted by a Hindu mother, Rani Krishna. At that time, began her golden period success during which she got crowned Miss Mumbai, Miss India, and finally Miss World. During that golden period, she suddenly became very rich girl. Michael could not believe that her crowning of Miss World and her adoption by a Hindu mother would make her such a wealthy girl. He remembered that Cristina told him when they were in America that she inherited her millions and overseas properties from her wealthy father. Her story in the internet did not mention that she had a wealthy father. She seemed to be a lonely girl who was forsaken by her Muslim mother when she was 7 years old. He discovered that in her public interview she mentioned that she was born to poor Muslim parents in a slum area at Mumbai. After that, Michael learned about her flight from the Mumbai Islamic terrorists who tried to assassinate her due to the controversial remarks she said about the Prophet Muhammad at the time of her crowning Miss World in London, UK. The statement did not make sense to Michael. He did not see that by calling the Prophet Muhammad my foot was any sort of insult. He believed that his girlfriend was supposed to call the Prophet Muhammad a pedophile instead of my foot. Michael believed that Muslims of the world were supposed to be happy when his girlfriend had likened their prophet to her foot because that sounded like an honor to him. For him, to be likened to the foot of Miss World was an honor rather than disgrace. Anyway, Michael learned that due to that controversial remark, Aphrodite Khan was forced to flee for her life. She ran to America to hide from the Muslim terrorists. After few years, the Islamic terrorists discovered her hiding place and assassinated her Muslim husband and daughter. In short, Michael Lewinsky learned many things about his Indian girlfriend that she had never mentioned to him when she met him at his grandparents' house. He concluded that those years of abuse and torture and imprisonment continued to be stored in the backside of her mind. They were boiling in her mind like molten lava in a volcano. The pressure the events brought to bear on her mind have been tremendous. She obviously had to cope with them so that she could function on a daily basis. For many years, the hidden and suppressed small girl, Ifat Khan waited for her Muslim mother to return to her life and restore the love that she could not find from her Hindu mother or buy it through her millions of dollars. In the back of her mind, the small Ifat continued to believe that her mother was supposed to feel guilty for taking her to Saudi Arabia and leaving her with that wicked old Arab man who abused, raped, and tortured her for 10 years. That day, in the courtroom, the abused Ifat Khan came to the surface and expected her Muslim mother to recognize her and apologize for forsaking her. She just longed for a kiss, a hug, and one word of comfort in line with the image of the mother that she carried with her all this time. She still saw her Muslim mother with the same eyes of the 7-year-old Ifat. However, the public denial and rejection by her own mother removed the one thing keeping her sanity. The image of her mother that had been her strength and comfort no longer existed. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. Her mother's denial was the crack that the molten lava was waiting for. All her troubled past and abusive experiences with those wicked men found their way to the surface of her mind and erupted like a gigantic volcano. In her confused state, memory and reality collided. Where she had successfully compartmentalized sections of her past in safe areas, they now burst forth, manifesting themselves as her new reality. Her mind began to play tricks on her and she started see and hear things. To protect herself, she would slash out. Michael Lewinsky was able to analyze his girlfriend's problem in the above understanding. Whether he was right or wrong was hard to tell. But one thing for sure, through his love, sacrifice, prayers, and fasting he was able to take her out of the deep ocean of darkness that engulfed her mind for many months to the bright shore of hope and love. Yes, she lost her memory and forgot he was her lover, but still he considered her sickness to be a blessing in disguise. She was freed from those painful memories of the terribly abused Ifat Khan. After Christina's discharge, Michael brought her to the safest place he knew of, the Jewish home where they first met and fell in love, the home of his loving grandparents. He began to fill her heart once again with his love. When Christina became recovered and responded to his ministrations, he proposed her. Even so, the two did not tie the knot until Christina completed her treatment and regained her memory. By that time, she had already spent over 2 years away from her selfish Christian husband, Bruno Fernandez. She applied for a divorce, resulting in the court sending a divorce notification to her Indian husband, but did not receive any reply. Regardless, the court granted her a divorce in absentia. Although Christina was now a divorcee and free to marry her lover, Michael uncovered one important problem needing rectification. He discovered that the many months his beloved had spent with the heretical Christian group in Mumbai had imbued her with a very distorted view of Christianity. Thus he felt the need to go back to basics, and acquaint his fiancée with the essential doctrines of the Bible before marrying her. Her mind was filled with many heretical teachings such as Arminianism, replacement theology, liberal theology, health and wealth or prosperity gospels, signs and wonders, slain in the spirit, holy laughter, etc. In order to free her mind from those heretical teachings, Michael decided to start from scratch and teach Christina the pivotal doctrines of the Bible. He decided to begin with the doctrine of original sin, and then salvation, the work of the Holy Spirit in the believer's life, the nature of Christ and Israel and the Church. Michael believed that if his beloved would master those important doctrines, then she could read the Bible by herself and no one could deceive her anymore. Michael was supremely patient with his beloved. He taught her the main doctrines of the Bible, precept upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little, and there a little. Finally, Christina married her lover, the completed Jew, Michael. In the same church she embraced Christianity and was baptized. It seemed to be the final shore on her raging seas and her last port of call after a long and painful trip in the voyage of Ifat Khan, the Indian slum girl. If it wasn't for her lover and spiritual friend, she would have suffered miserably and died a lonely death in the filthy cell of the Mumbai mental hospital, in the city where she was born into a destitute Muslim slum family. After their marriage, Christina and Michael lived in a beautiful big mansion, which they built in the little town where they had met for the first time. They continued to be committed Christians and attended the church regularly. If it wasn't for the fact that we live in uncursed grounds and in the midst of an evil society where sinners and sins abound, one might end the accounts of Ifat's life story with the romantic fairy tales phrase, and they lived happily ever after. But happy ending can never be realized in this life. It is possible only in fiction and fairy tale. To be continued in Book 4, under the title, The Tears of God.